Hi, it's Liz Sneddon. I'm just going to talk you through a little bit of some of the ideas behind the new Achievement Standard 1.3, which is our Maths and Stats Literacy. So a little note that this is my personal guess at what they could end up looking like, and this is obviously only the stage in the process in August here that there's still feedback that's coming in, and so there will be some more changes and tweaks and adjustments done before the standards are finalised. So please, the NCA Education website, that is the go-to, that has the most up-to-date info. So this is just some information. So it's called, the standards proposed to be called Interpret and Apply Mathematical and Statistical Information in Context. So it's the idea that you can extract info and you can make some kind of judgment about that information. Our merit thinking, so that's our solo, our relational thinking, there's our explanations and our justifications. So being able to reason and say it's this because. And then the excellence is that deeper reflection and looking at what are some of the assumptions or limitations of what the information that's been given is. So the sources could include graphs, tables, text, and one of the things that we've asked for from NZQA is the ability to have an exam that is digital, online, where there might be, for example, interactive graphs that students can hover over things, they can modify things, they can actually explore it, or they might use a media article, which is a 30-second news clip that a report has done, or so that there's a variety of different things that could be done. Obviously this is long-term thinking, and that's kind of the ideal, being able to use all these sources. Obviously NZQA now have the more difficult job of trying to put that into an exam that's fair and consistent and equitable for all students. And so this evolution will take a little while. So when we talk about having an informed judgment, that means being able to form an assessment or evaluation of something, or form an opinion or perspective of something. So the ministry has said that students in general, for real life use, they need to be able to make well-founded judgments. So they've got to be able to look at, for example, the loan schemes that are being offered by different banks and other lenders, and they need to be able to make an informed judgment about what scheme is best, which cell phone plan is the better option. This COVID data that we've got out, do I trust it? Do I not trust it? So we want people to be able to be making informed judgments about things using mathematical and statistical ideas and concepts. So some of the things that they could include is looking into the sources of variation, looking at misleading information, extracting information from texts, reports, graphs, etc. Then going on to make some kind of informed decisions. So that could include some financial literacy ideas, looking at claims and interpreting information and looking at it all in a context. So that's the kind of thing that we are envisaging at the moment. So the idea is that it would be a common assessment task and issued around the end of term 2, and our thoughts are that the reason we want a common assessment task was so that schools can choose which part of the day in their timetable they assess it, but it is an external standard, so NZQA write the assessment, they mark the assessment, so it's not like the MCAT, which we have to do the marking ourselves. This would be completely done externally. It's just we manage the assessment during the day at a time that suits us. So that's the background. If you're familiar at all with the Level 3 Statistics Internal Evaluate Stats reports, That's the style that we might be envisaging. So where you've given a report or a short article, and you've been asked some information about that. Obviously at a lower level, not curriculum level 8, but further down for the year 11s. So let's have a look at what mathematical literacy actually is. And so this is the OECD's definition. So they say it's an individual's capacity to identify and understand the role that maths plays in the world, to make well-founded judgments, to use and engage with maths in ways that meet the needs of their life as a constructive, concerned and reflective citizen. So that's what we're looking for, is thinking about issues that are relevant to them at this age and being able to see the mathematical ideas inside it and understand and use them to make good judgments. So here's a few examples, and apologies, I pulled this together very quickly, but this is the style I think we were thinking about. And as I say, I'm not promising anything because the actual examiner is somebody else and they will have their own interpretation of our standard, and it's still yet to be evolved after feedback. So things like the first one there, I've got 3 different loan schemes, and the information that's underneath it talks about how much it costs to administer the loan, how much interest you pay, things like that. So the questions to start with at achieve level would be that idea of extracting information from it. So how much money has that person borrowed? Which one has the highest interest rate? And then going into the judgment side of it, making an informed judgment, which one are you recommending? And justify and explain that. And then you can even go into the difference. What's the difference between simple interest and compound interest? So then the second graph that we've got underneath there, so that's looking at different social media platforms and how many users there are. So looking at when did they get over a certain point. So just identifying information, extracting info from a graph. Estimate the growth. So that might be calculating some gradients. Explaining the graph. So there's our contextual insight. So why is it that WhatsApp's increased? And then looking at the slowest growth. And that could be explaining that could be from looking into gradients, could be from more contextual insight. There's a variety of ways that could be approached. Here we've got some information about the NHS budget. So these are just graphs I just pulled very quickly off the internet. Okay, so looking at that and saying, well, is a linear, quadratic or exponential most appropriate? So only covering the content at the right curriculum level, but still being able to look at that and go, actually, that looks more like this graph or that graph. So knowing what kind of model might be appropriate. Underneath, there's an example there of YouTube performance of a video, and so looking at extracting information about percentages, about numbers of views, the ratios, so it's all about that idea of numerical, algebraic, modelling graphs. I haven't done examples with geometry and measurement and things in there, but I'm sure that could come out. But so that's the idea of being able to extract information, reason with it, and form a judgment. So then this other side would be the statistical literacy. So again, that's being able to reason with data and statistics. And so there's a little bit of a snapshot there of something from Census at School about what their viewpoint is, that it's being a data-savvy citizen. And they've got a number of critical questions that they've developed over a long time to help evaluate statistical information. So here's a few more examples of what statistical literacy might look like. Looking at this graph and going, well, what does it mean when they say 8 and 10? And how is that 78% shown? So then there's a claim. Do you agree with the claim that nearly 7 in 10 Americans have done something? So not getting into the claims that we normally seen at year 12 and 13 about the how many times more likely and things like that, but just looking at a straightforward claim, 7 and 10, 6 and 10, 8 and 10, that kind of idea. And then a bit of comparison to go into a bit more detail, comparing New Zealanders with Americans. So thinking about where was the data coming from. Would there be differences in the population in America and New Zealand? Here's a couple more. So this is looking at a graph that they may not have seen before, but still being able to extract information from it. So being able to look at that and go, oh, okay, it's this great big dots and small dots and whatnot, but what does it probably mean? So what is the sizes of the graph actually going to represent in this situation? And seeing if they can interpret information, because over the next 20 years there's going to be a lot of new graphs that come out. We've seen a lot in the last 10 years, and that'll keep evolving. So students need to have some skills to be able to deal with a graph they haven't seen before. Then of course the one down the bottom, a nice scatter graph there, and thinking about, okay, well, what are some of the features of that? What is the graph telling us? And you could go into a lot more detail there. So our lovely pie charts, which I must admit, as a stats teacher, I hate pie charts with an absolute vengeance, because our eyes are not good at seeing angles, and so they are very easily misinterpreted and misdrawn, and so they can be quite misleading easily. So, but that being said, they exist. I've got to deal with them, and so in this case I've just found a nice example of one that says, actually, how could you draw this graph better? Because this pie chart is not great. And so that kind of idea that we could do as well. And then down the bottom there's a bit of a time series pattern going on there. So thinking about what are some of the patterns that they could see on there, and what improvements could you suggest. So thinking about their scales, thinking about what the data is, what the years it's covered, and whatnot. And it's talking about accommodation card spending. Does everyone pay by card? What would it be different if they're paying in cash? Do you think that would be much different in this day and age for those years? So there's a whole bunch of kind of reasoning that they could extract from that. So hopefully that gives you a few thoughts and ideas about what that could be. And if you go back to the curriculum, that's our basis of what topics might be covered within this, is that it could be from the general curriculum, it could be from all of the strands. And so this is again another of them trying to merge and reconnect the strands and the learning together in a cohesive way. Hopefully that's helpful, guys. Thanks for that.